Introduction. Stop for a second. Look at your life right now. The open tabs in your browser, the unread messages waiting for your attention, the half-finished projects collecting dust, the goals you wrote down last January that somehow feel further away today than the day you wrote them. If something inside you just whispered, "Yes, that's me," you're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not behind. You're just buried. Buried under something nobody warned you about. Buried under the quiet belief that the more complicated your life looks, the more meaningful it must be. Buried under the idea that if you're not constantly juggling, optimizing, hustling, and stacking new strategies on top of old ones, you must be falling behind. And here's the painful part. The thing you think is helping you, that endless layering of effort, planning, and ambition, is the very thing keeping you stuck. We've been sold a strange lie in the modern era. The lie says that depth equals difficulty, that sophistication equals complexity, that the smartest person in the room is the one with the most elaborate plan, the most tools, the most spreadsheets, the most categories in their to-do app. But when you actually watch the people whose lives quietly thrive, the ones who build wealth without burning out, who write books that outlast trends, who raise children who actually like them, who wake up calm and go to bed proud, you notice something different. Their lives look almost suspiciously simple. Not boring, not empty, simple. There's a difference, and that difference is the secret we're going to unpack together in this book. This is not another productivity manual. This is not a list of life hacks or morning routines copied from someone you'll never meet. This is a conversation between you and someone who genuinely wants you to stop fighting yourself. Because that's what complexity really is when you strip it down. It's a quiet war with yourself, dressed up in the costume of ambition. And nobody told you that you could just put the costume down. In the chapters ahead, we're going to look at why your brain craves complexity even when it hurts you. We're going to look at how to make fewer decisions and somehow end up with better outcomes. We're going to look at how friction, that invisible drag you feel every morning when you try to start something important, can be dismantled piece by piece until momentum becomes your default state. We're going to look at money, relationships, attention, identity, and the strange way that owning less stuff, less opinions, less obligations, less noise, gives you more of the one thing you actually want, which is freedom. But before we go further, I want you to hear something that took me far too long to learn. Your life isn't hard because you're not trying hard enough. Your life is hard because you've been trying at too many things, in too many directions, with too much noise crowding out the signal. The exhaustion you feel isn't a sign you need to push harder. It's a sign you need to choose better. And choosing better is what simplicity actually means. Not less ambition, not less love, not less curiosity, just less clutter wrapped around the things that matter. So take a breath, loosen your shoulders. We're going to walk through this together. By the end, I hope you'll see that the life you've been chasing isn't waiting on the other side of more effort. It's waiting on the other side of less interference. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Strip away the illusions and see what's actually there. Here's something nobody tells you when you're trying to fix your life. Most of the problems you spend your energy fighting aren't the real problems. They're shadows, they're stories, they're versions of reality your mind built when you weren't paying attention, and now you're battling those versions instead of the truth. Think about it this way. Imagine waking up in a room you've never seen before, and someone hands you a map. You spend the next 10 years navigating that map, planning routes, building strategies, working around obstacles drawn on the paper. Then one day you look up from the map and realize the room you're standing in looks nothing like what you've been studying. The walls are in different places. The doors are somewhere else. The exit you've been searching for is 2 steps to your left, and it always was. That's what living without clarity feels like. You're not failing. You're just navigating a fictional version of your life. Before you can simplify anything, you have to learn how to actually see. And I don't mean see with your eyes, I mean see without the filters your fears placed over them, without the decorations your ego painted on them, and without the marketing the world keeps whispering into your ears about what your life is supposed to look like by now. Most of what feels heavy in your life isn't reality itself. It's your interpretation of reality. And interpretation can be rewritten the moment you're brave enough to look at things as they are. Let me ask you something gentle. Think back to the last big problem you wrestled with. Maybe it was a relationship that felt impossible. Maybe it was a decision at work that kept you up at night. Maybe it was a financial situation that seemed to have no way out. Now ask yourself honestly, how much of that problem was the actual situation, and how much was the story your mind built around the situation? How much was the wall, and how much was the imagined wall behind the wall, and the imagined wall behind that one? When we're stressed, our minds become factories of fictional obstacles. We multiply the difficulty before we ever attempt the task, and then we wonder why we feel paralyzed. Clarity is not something you summon by trying harder. It's something you arrive at by slowing down. There's a quiet practice I want to share with you, one that costs nothing and changes everything. When something feels overwhelming, stop and ask yourself 4 questions. What is actually happening here in the simplest possible terms? What is the real problem I'm trying to solve, not the surface one? What would this look like if it were genuinely simple? And what would I do right now if I weren't afraid of looking unprepared or foolish? These questions seem almost childish at first. That's exactly why they work. Adulthood teaches us to dress every question in sophistication, to add nuance, to consider every angle, to weigh every possibility. But sometimes the smartest move you can make is to ask the most basic question and refuse to leave the room until you have an honest answer. Honest answers are the foundation of every simple life. Without them, you're just decorating the confusion. There's an illusion most of us carry that I want to name out loud. It's the illusion that more equals better. More information will make this decision easier. More tools will make this project succeed. More research will make this risk feel safer. More options will make this choice clearer. But here's what nobody warns you about. Beyond a certain point, more becomes worse. More information becomes confusion. More tools become distractions. More research becomes procrastination, wearing a lab coat. More options become paralysis. The next time you catch yourself reaching for more, ask whether you actually need more, or whether you're just nervous about deciding with what you already have. Then there's the illusion of prestige. This one is sneaky because it pretends to be wisdom. Prestige whispers that simple things must be shallow, that if your plan can be explained in 2 sentences, it must not be serious enough, that if your business model fits on a napkin, it can't possibly compete with the elaborate decks and dashboards of your industry. But look at the people who've actually built lasting things. A baker who's been making the same bread for 40 years and has a line outside her shop every morning. A writer who follows the same daily ritual that fits on an index card. An investor whose strategy is so plain it could be summarized at a dinner table. They didn't strip away because they couldn't think of more. They stripped away because they understood that depth and complexity are not the same thing. Depth is when something simple goes very, very far. Complexity is when something shallow tries to look impressive. And finally, there's the illusion of timing, the one that exhausts us most. We believe everything must happen now, all at once, in some grand simultaneous explosion of progress. Career, health, relationships, wealth, creativity, travel, family, all blooming at the same moment. Complexity loves this lie because urgency keeps you too rushed to question anything. When you slow down enough to ask, what if I don't need to do all of this at once? What if it's okay to do one thing well right now and another thing well later? The entire weight of your life starts to shift. You begin to notice that the rush was self-imposed. You begin to feel space inside your own life again. And that space is where clarity lives. Clarity doesn't make the hard things easy. Let me be honest with you about that. What clarity does is something even better. It makes hard things workable. It turns a fog of anxiety into a sequence of small, doable steps. It turns, I don't know where to start, into, I'll start here. It turns, everything is broken, into, this one thing is broken, and I can fix it tomorrow. That's not magic. That's just sight. And sight is the first gift you give yourself when you decide to live a simpler life. So before you reach for another tool, another app, another framework, another guru's 7-step system, try this instead. Sit somewhere quiet. Look at one part of your life that feels heavy. Strip away the fear narrating it. Strip away the ego dressing it up. Strip away the social media version of how it's supposed to look. And see what's actually there. You might be surprised. Most of what felt impossible was just unexamined. Once you look at it clearly, it becomes one of 2 things, either something you can handle or something you can release. Both are gifts. Both are freedom. Chapter 2. Stop confusing complexity with progress. We live in a strange moment in history. Being busy has become a personality trait. Walk into any coffee shop, scroll through any feed, sit at any dinner table, and you'll hear the same melody. I'm so swamped. I haven't slept. My calendar is insane. I'm running on fumes. There's something in our culture right now that treats exhaustion like a trophy, as if the more depleted you appear, the more important your life must be. And while this performance might earn you sympathy at parties, it slowly poisons something essential inside you. It teaches you to confuse motion with movement, activity with achievement, complexity with progress. I want to draw a clear line between 2 words that often get mistaken for each other. Activity is what you do. Progress is what changes because of what you do. They sound similar, but they live in completely different worlds. Activity can fill an entire day, an entire month, an entire career without producing a single meaningful result. Progress, on the other hand, leaves evidence. Something exists at the end of it that didn't exist before. A finished page, a shipped product, a repaired relationship, a skill that operates inside your hands now that wasn't there a year ago. Progress doesn't whisper, it leaves footprints. Complexity is allergic to footprints. Complexity wants you to keep moving, keep adjusting, keep refining, keep planning, keep tweaking, but never quite finish. Because the moment you finish, complexity loses its grip on you. Completion forces a pause, and complexity hates pauses. So it keeps adding tasks to your list, keeps suggesting one more revision, keeps proposing one more meeting, keeps inviting one more variable into the equation. And before you know it, your week has been stolen by motion that produced almost nothing real. I want you to do something with me right now, gently. Think about the last week of your life. Don't judge it, just look at it. How many hours did you spend on activities that felt productive at the moment, but left no trace afterward? How many emails did you compose that didn't move a single thing forward? How many meetings did you attend that could have been a two-sentence message? How many times did you reorganize, replan, or research instead of doing? This isn't an accusation, it's an invitation. Because what most people call burnout isn't really from working too hard. It's from working hard at the wrong things and getting nothing back in return. The body can handle effort. The soul can't handle effort that goes nowhere. Here's something worth sitting with. Complexity often feels productive precisely because it engages the mind. Your brain loves variables, frameworks, layers, and intellectual movement. When you build a 15-step plan for a project, your brain rewards you with a small dopamine hit. Look at this beautiful structure I made. Look at how thorough I am. Look at how prepared I'm becoming. But preparation without action is just intellectual decoration. It feels like work. It looks like work. But nothing real is being built. Meanwhile, the person 2 streets over is doing the simple version of your idea, imperfectly, slowly, but every day. And in 6 months, they'll have a finished thing while you'll have a perfectly organized folder of plans. There's a reason people choose complexity over simplicity, and it's tender enough that I want to say it carefully. Complexity protects the ego. When your plan is incredibly elaborate, you have a built-in explanation for why it hasn't worked yet. It's complicated. There are so many moving parts. I'm still optimizing. A simple plan offers no such cushion. If your plan is 2 steps and you didn't do them, there's nowhere to hide. The bottleneck is right there, looking at you in the mirror. That's terrifying and honest. And ultimately, that's why simplicity is so much harder than it looks. Simple paths leave you nowhere to disappear. Look at how this plays out in the world around you. A massive company restructures its strategy for the 5th time in 2 years, hiring consultants, holding offsites, drawing org charts in 3 colors. Meanwhile, a small competitor with one clear product and one clear promise quietly takes their customers. A person enrolls in their 7th course on starting a side business, downloads 4 new project management apps, joins 3 accountability groups, and a year later still hasn't sold anything to anyone. Meanwhile, someone else with no apps and no courses launched a tiny offer to 10 people they knew and built a real income from it. The difference isn't talent. It isn't intelligence. It's that one of them was performing readiness while the other was practicing arrival. Progress lives in one question: and I want you to memorize it. What is the next single action that moves this forward? Not the next 10 actions, not the perfect action, not the optimized action, the next single one. That question is a knife through complexity. It refuses to let you hide behind planning. It refuses to let you confuse research with results. It pulls you out of the comfortable cloud of thinking and drops you into the slightly uncomfortable ground of doing. And doing, even imperfect doing, is where every meaningful change in your life will come from. Think about the fields where mastery is undeniable. A dancer who's been training since childhood doesn't have a complicated routine. They have a few movements they've done 10,000 times. A surgeon doesn't have a chaotic process. They have a clean sequence they've practiced into reflex. A grandmother who makes the soup everyone in the family begs for doesn't follow a 30-ingredient recipe. She has 6 ingredients and 40 years of feel. Mastery is what happens when the simple is repeated with patience. Complexity is what happens when patience runs out and you start adding things to compensate. Now let's bring this home. Look at the goals you say you care about. Your health, your finances, your craft, your relationships. Ask yourself gently and honestly, where are you adding complexity because the simple version feels too exposed? You don't need an elaborate system to be healthier. You need to eat real food and move your body. You don't need a complicated wealth strategy. You need to spend less than you earn, save consistently, and let time do its work. You don't need a sophisticated approach to friendship. You need to call people, show up when it matters, and listen when they speak. These aren't naive, they're true, and they're hard, not because they're complicated, but because they leave no room for excuses. I'm not telling you to throw away nuance. Life has texture, and that texture matters. What I'm telling you is to stop measuring your progress by how complicated your effort looks. The world will applaud you for looking busy. The world will praise you for having a packed schedule. The world will admire your color-coded calendar. But the world will not give you back the years you spent performing instead of building. Only you can decide to stop confusing one for the other, and the day you do, something quietly shifts inside you. The exhaustion eases, the fog lifts, and you begin to taste what real progress feels like. Not louder, not flashier, just real. Compounded simplicity is one of the most underrated forces in human life. It looks unimpressive in the short term and undeniable in the long term. Most people quit before the compounding kicks in because the early months look like nothing is happening. But the seeds are doing their quiet work underground. Trust that work. Trust the slowness. Trust the smallness. Because while complexity is busy impressing the crowd, simplicity is busy impressing time. And time, my friend, is the only judge that matters. Chapter 3. Teach your mind to walk the simple path. There's something honest I need to share with you before we go any further. Your mind, as brilliant as it is, will not choose simplicity on its own. It's wired against it. Left to its own devices, your mind will reach for the complicated option every single time, not because complexity is better, but because complexity feels safer. And until you understand why your own brain works against your peace, you'll keep wondering why simple solutions slip through your fingers even when they're sitting right in front of you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A complicated plan gives your ego a place to live. If your strategy has 17 variables, 8 contingencies, and 4 backup options, you've built a beautiful fortress against failure. Because if it doesn't work, you have 1,000 explanations ready. The market shifted. The timing wasn't right. We were still refining the approach. There are too many moving parts. Complexity gives you a cushion to fall into. A simple plan, though? A simple plan strips you naked. If you say, I'll write 1 page a day for a year, and a year later, there's no book, there's nowhere to hide. The plan was simple. The execution was you. And that vulnerability is exactly why most people unconsciously avoid simple paths, even when they desperately want simple lives. Choosing simplicity isn't lazy. It isn't cutting corners. It isn't dumbing things down. Choosing simplicity is one of the most courageous things a human being can do, because it means removing the excuses you've been carrying around like emotional armor. And when the armor comes off, what's left is just you, your effort, and the truth of your results. That's hard. That's humbling. And that's where real growth begins. So how do you actually train your mind to walk this path? It starts with a skill I want you to practice gently this week. The skill of constraint. Constraint is the deliberate act of limiting your options. Most people think freedom comes from having more choices, but anyone who's ever stood paralyzed in front of a 30-page restaurant menu knows that's not quite true. Too many choices don't expand you. They flatten you. Constraint is when you say to yourself, I'm going to try this one approach for the next 30 days, and I'm not going to switch, tweak, or compare it to other approaches until that month is finished. That kind of voluntary limitation feels claustrophobic at first. Then, somewhere around day 10, it starts to feel like relief, because for the first time in a long time, you're moving instead of evaluating. The next skill is reduction. Reduction is the quiet courage to look at your project, your day, your life, and ask, what can I remove without losing what matters? The chef who finally takes one ingredient out of the recipe and discovers the dish was always better without it. The musician who plays the simpler arrangement and watches the audience lean in deeper. The entrepreneur who cuts 3 product features and watches sales climb. Reduction isn't an act of poverty, it's an act of precision. And precision, like clarity, is one of those words that sounds clinical until you experience it. Then it feels like coming home. There's another skill that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's sequencing. Sequencing is recognizing that life isn't a parallel processor. You can't do everything at once. The dream of simultaneous progress in every direction is one of the most exhausting lies the modern world sells you. Sequencing is the art of choosing what comes first, what comes second, what comes later, and what can wait. When everything is happening at once, nothing is actually happening, because attention can't split itself without diluting itself. But when you sequence your life, when you say, this year I'm focused on my health, and next year I'll layer in the business expansion, something beautiful happens. Things actually get finished, and finished things compound in ways that simultaneous attempts never do. Then there's subtraction, which might be the hardest skill of all. Subtraction is releasing the parts of your life that no longer fit who you're becoming. Old commitments, old hobbies that don't bring you joy anymore, old friendships that drain more than they give, old goals you set when you were a different person with different values. Most of us walk around carrying a backpack full of decisions we made years ago, and we never stop to ask whether those decisions still serve us. Subtraction is the gentle act of unpacking that backpack, item by item, and choosing what to keep and what to release. It's not betrayal. It's not abandonment. It's honesty about who you are now versus who you used to be. And honesty is always lighter than pretending. I want to talk about perfectionism for a moment, because perfectionism is complexity in a tailored suit. It looks responsible. It sounds noble. It convinces you that you're not procrastinating, you're just being thorough. But perfectionism isn't a commitment to quality. It's a commitment to fear. It's the fear of being seen as inadequate dressed up as the desire to be excellent. And it's one of the most expensive habits a person can carry, because it doesn't just slow you down, it stops you entirely. The article never gets published, the business never launches, the book never gets written, the conversation never happens. Perfectionism kills more dreams than failure ever did. Simplicity, on the other hand, worships momentum. It says, done is better than perfect. Imperfect motion beats perfect stillness. Get it out, then refine it. That mindset will change your life if you let it. Here's the part I want you to feel deeply. Choosing simplicity also means choosing responsibility. Once your path is simple, the bottleneck stops being external and becomes internal. You can't blame the system anymore. You can't blame the timing. You can't blame the tools. You can't blame the people around you. When the path is clear and you didn't walk it, the reason is you. And that takes real emotional strength to accept. Most people aren't ready for that level of ownership, which is why they keep their plans intentionally complicated. As long as the path is messy, the failure is shared. The moment the path is clean, the failure is yours alone. And so is the success. This is why training your mind for simplicity isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's an emotional one. It requires you to develop the capacity to sit with discomfort. The discomfort of seeing yourself clearly. The discomfort of having no one to blame. The discomfort of recognizing where you've been hiding. But here's the gift on the other side of that discomfort. Decision-making becomes effortless. Action becomes natural. The fog you've been wading through for years starts to lift, and you realize you can finally see where you're going. Not because the world got simpler, but because you stopped agreeing to make it harder than it needed to be. So, start small. You don't have to overhaul your life this week. You don't have to throw out half your possessions, or quit your job, or rewrite your identity. Pick one decision today and make it simple. Pick one task and strip it down to its essential form. Pick one goal that's been swirling in vague ambition and turn it into a single concrete action you can take this afternoon. Then notice what happens. Notice how your nervous system relaxes when there's only one thing in front of you instead of 17. Notice how your energy returns when you're not constantly negotiating with yourself. Notice how confidence builds when small, simple things actually get finished. That's the path. That's how you train this. One simplified moment at a time, until simplicity stops being a strategy and becomes who you are. The world is loud. Complexity is louder. But simplicity, when you finally let it in, speaks with a quiet voice that you'll come to trust more than any other. It will guide you when the noise is deafening. It will steady you when everything feels urgent. It will remind you every time you forget that the real path forward was always closer than you thought. Chapter 4: Fewer Choices, Stronger Moves. I want to share something with you that might explain why you felt so drained lately, even on days when you didn't accomplish much. It's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's not a character flaw. It's a hidden tax you've been paying without realizing it. The tax of decision making. Every single day, your mind makes thousands of micro decisions. What to wear, what to eat, which message to answer first, whether to take that call, what to put on the grocery list, whether to start the laundry now or later, which song to play, which route to drive, which task to do first when you sit down at your desk. Most of these choices feel weightless individually, like dropping a single grain of sand into a glass. But after a few thousand grains, the glass starts to fill. By the end of the day, that glass is heavy. By the end of the week, you're exhausted, and you can't even point to a single dramatic event that drained you, because the drain didn't come from one big thing. It came from 1,000 small ones. This is what researchers call decision fatigue, but I prefer to think of it more honestly. It's the slow leak of your mental energy into trivial choices that don't deserve your power. And the cruelest part is that by the time you sit down to make the choices that actually matter, the ones that could change your career, your health, your relationships, you're already running on fumes. You've spent your best clarity on whether to have eggs or toast for breakfast. So when the moment comes to make a decision that could shape your future, you choose the path of least resistance because there's nothing left in the tank. Simplicity doesn't ask you to make better decisions. Simplicity asks you to make fewer decisions so that the ones you do make can be made with full power. There's a difference, and that difference is everything. Here's the shift I want to walk you through. Most people live in a state of constant reactive choosing. Something happens. They respond. A notification arrives. They decide whether to check it. A request comes in. They evaluate it. An option appears. They weigh it. This kind of life feels active, but it's actually deeply passive. You're not designing your day. Your day is designing you. The alternative, the simpler alternative, is to convert as many of your reactive choices as possible into proactive defaults. Defaults are predetermined decisions you don't have to remake every time. You decided once, and now the decision lives in the structure of your life instead of in your head. Think about it like this. If you've ever watched someone who's deeply healthy, you've probably noticed they don't agonize over food choices the way most people do. They have defaults. They eat similar things most days. They know what works for their body. They've removed the daily negotiation. Same with people who train consistently. They don't wake up wondering if today is a workout day. They know. The day is the workout. Same with deeply productive people. They don't decide each morning when to do their important work. The block is already on the calendar. The decision was made months ago. Routines aren't a cage. Routines are a kindness you give your future self. They protect tomorrow, you from having to negotiate with yourself when tomorrow you is tired. They lock in your good intentions before life has a chance to argue with them. And the people who seem to effortlessly achieve a lot aren't actually working harder than you. They've just removed the friction of constant choosing. Their lives run on rails so that their minds can focus on what's actually meaningful. There's another principle worth absorbing here, and it's the principle of voluntary constraint. The modern world keeps shouting at you that more choice equals more freedom. But your nervous system will tell you a different story if you listen. Walk into a store with 3 pairs of jeans and you'll find one in 5 minutes. Walk into a store with 300 pairs of jeans and you'll either walk out empty-handed or buy something you don't love because decision fatigue forced your hand. Constraint isn't oppression. Constraint is what lets your brain breathe. When you decide in advance what you won't consider, what you won't pursue, what you won't buy, what you won't agree to, you create enormous space for the things that actually matter. I want to introduce you to a quiet skill that will change how your week unfolds, and it's called batching. Batching is the practice of grouping similar tasks together instead of scattering them throughout the day. Most people answer messages constantly, take calls whenever they ring, do errands as they come up, and bounce between dozens of contexts every single day. Each switch costs you. There's a real cognitive price every time your mind has to load a new context, and over a day, that price adds up to hours of lost clarity. Batching pays that tax all at once instead of paying it 100 times. You answer messages in 2 windows a day, not all day. You run errands in 1 trip, not 5. You take calls in a designated block, not whenever the phone decides to ring. The result is a strange kind of spaciousness in your day, a feeling that you actually have time again, even though no time has been added. Now let's talk about the decisions that do deserve your full attention, because making fewer decisions only matters if the ones you keep are the right ones. And here's where most people get tripped up. They confuse urgency with importance. Urgency screams. Importance whispers. Urgency demands a response now. Importance just sits there, quietly compounding over time. The urgent task makes you feel busy and useful in the moment. The important task changes your life in 5 years. Almost everything that has shaped human lives for the better, deep relationships, mastered skills, built businesses, healthy bodies, was never urgent. It was important. And the difference between the people who build remarkable lives and the people who don't often comes down to whether they could resist the urgent enough to honor the important. Ask yourself this: what in your life is genuinely important but never feels urgent? Probably the very things you've been postponing for years, the book you've been meaning to write, the conversation you've been meaning to have, the skill you've been meaning to learn, the body you've been meaning to take care of. These things never demand your attention with a ringing phone or a flashing notification, which is exactly why they get neglected. Simplicity reorganizes your priorities so that the quiet, important things get protected from the loud, urgent things. Without that protection, the loud will always win, and you'll wake up at 60 wondering where your life went. When you reduce the number of priorities you carry, something remarkable happens. Your progress doesn't slow down, it accelerates. People assume that having more priorities means accomplishing more. But the opposite is true. Energy is like sunlight. Spread across a wide area, it gently warms the room. Focused through a lens, it can burn through metal. Most people are warming rooms with their attention. A few people are burning through metal. The difference isn't talent, it's concentration. So here's the practice. Throughout your day, gently ask yourself these questions. Does this really need a decision from me right now, or can it become a default? Is this noise that's pretending to be a priority? Am I genuinely making progress, or am I gathering more information to avoid choosing? And the most powerful question of all, if I could only do one thing right now, what would actually move my life forward? That question, asked sincerely, will dissolve more confusion in your life than any productivity system ever invented. Fewer decisions don't mean a smaller life. They mean a bigger one, because the decisions you keep get the full weight of your clarity behind them. And clarity, my friend, is the rarest and most valuable resource you possess. Don't spend it on what to wear. Save it for what matters. Chapter 5. Honor the vital few. Release the trivial many. I want to tell you something that took me a long time to understand, and it might be one of the most important truths in this entire book. The results that shape a life, the ones that show up in your health, your relationships, your finances, your sense of purpose, are almost never produced by a long list of activities. They're produced by a small number of actions, done with quiet consistency over a long period of time. A tiny fraction of what you do creates the overwhelming majority of what you become. And once you see this clearly, you start to notice how much of your daily energy is being spent on things that don't really matter, while the things that actually matter keep getting postponed. I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm saying it because I've been there too, and so has almost everyone who's ever tried to build a meaningful life. We get caught up in the trivial many because the trivial many are loud, urgent, and emotionally satisfying. They demand quick responses. They give us little hits of accomplishment. They make us feel productive without requiring us to confront the work that actually matters. The trivial many are like fast food for the soul. They fill you up temporarily, but they don't nourish you. And after a year of eating that way, you wonder why you feel empty, even though you've been so busy. The vital few are different. They're quieter. They don't beg for your attention. They sit there patiently, waiting to be chosen. They don't promise quick results. They don't reward you with instant gratification. They ask for something that the modern world has nearly forgotten how to give: patience. The vital few compound slowly. You can spend 3 months on them and barely see anything change. Then one day, somewhere around month 9 or month 12, the results start to arrive, and they arrive in a way that nothing else in your life can match. That's the deal the vital few make with you. Trust me for a while, and I'll change your life. So the question becomes, how do you actually identify the vital few in your own life? Because they're rarely obvious. The trivial many disguise themselves as the vital few all the time. The urgent email feels important. The minor crisis at work feels important. The social obligation feels important. But importance, real importance, is measured by a different ruler. Ask yourself these questions when you're trying to separate them. If I did this consistently for the next decade, would my life be genuinely better? If I stopped doing this tomorrow, would anything truly meaningful change? Does this create something that will keep paying me back, or does it just keep me running in place? Is this action building a foundation, or is it patching a wall that's going to keep cracking? The vital few always pass these tests. They build foundations. They create leverage. They produce results that outlast the effort that created them. The trivial many, no matter how loud they are, consume your energy and leave nothing behind. Let me give you some honest examples from real life. In the realm of health, the vital few are deceptively simple. Eat real food, move your body regularly, sleep deeply, drink water, manage your stress. That's it. Everything else, the new supplement, the trending diet, the complicated workout split you saw on a video, the wellness app that buzzes you 14 times a day, those are the trivial many. They might add small improvements, but they're not the foundation. The foundation is the boring stuff your grandmother probably told you, and it still works. In the realm of work, the vital few might be developing a rare skill, doing deep work without interruption, and nurturing a small number of genuine professional relationships. The trivial many are the endless meetings, the constant networking events you don't really want to attend, the productivity apps you keep switching between, the emails you respond to within 30 seconds because you're afraid of looking unresponsive. The trivial many make you feel professional. The vital few actually build a career. In the realm of finances, the vital few are spending less than you earn, investing what you save consistently, and avoiding debt that doesn't produce value. The trivial many are the endless searches for the perfect investment, the obsession with timing the market, the comparison of your portfolio to other people's portfolios, the chase for the next hot tip. Notice the pattern. The vital few are simple. The trivial many are exciting. And exciting almost always loses to simple over a long enough time frame. In the realm of relationships, the vital few are showing up consistently, listening with full presence, expressing appreciation, and being honest when honesty is hard. The trivial many are the perfect gifts, the elaborate gestures, the public displays, the careful management of how the relationship appears to others. People feel loved by the vital few. They're impressed momentarily by the trivial many. But impression isn't love. Love is shown over thousands of small, simple moments. Now I want to gently confront something that gets in the way of choosing the vital few, and that's the discomfort of saying no. You cannot protect what's vital in your life if you're addicted to agreeing with everything that comes your way. Every yes you give to something trivial is a no to something vital. You can't say yes to everyone and everything and somehow still have the energy left for what actually matters. The math doesn't work. Boundaries aren't selfish. Boundaries are how vital things stay vital. Without boundaries, your priorities will always be invaded by other people's urgencies, and you'll spend your life serving everyone except the parts of yourself that needed you most. I know this is hard. I know saying no feels like disappointing people. I know there's a part of you that wants to be seen as helpful, available, generous, and you can be all of those things. But you can also recognize that being everything to everyone means being nothing to the things that matter most, including yourself. The people who build remarkable lives are not the people who said yes to everything. They're the people who said yes to a few things and protected those things with quiet fierceness. There's another trap worth naming, and it's the trap of social validation. The trivial many often get rewarded socially. People notice when you're busy. They notice when you respond quickly. They notice when you're at every event. They notice when you're juggling 100 things at once. They don't notice when you spend 2 hours alone working on your craft. They don't notice when you take a quiet walk to think. They don't notice when you read instead of scrolling. The vital few often happen in invisible places, and because they're invisible, they don't get the applause that the trivial many get. So we drift toward the visible work, the appreciated work, the noticed work, while the quiet work that would actually change our lives sits untouched. Here's the gentle revolution I want to invite you into. Stop measuring your life by what people see. Start measuring it by what compounds. The trivial many will always be visible. The vital few will almost always be quiet. And the quiet things, when given enough time, will build a life so good that you won't need anyone's validation to know it. You don't have to overhaul everything tonight. Start with one shift. Look at your week and identify one thing in the trivial many that's been stealing your energy. Just one. Let it go. Then identify one vital few action that you've been postponing because it doesn't feel urgent. Just one. Commit to it. Do it tomorrow. Then again the next day. Then again. Don't worry about the rest of your life right now. Just protect that one vital thing and watch what happens over the next 90 days. I promise you, the trade you'll have made, releasing one trivial thing to honor one vital thing, will return to you many times over. The vital few always do. The world will always offer you more trivial things to do than you have hours to do them. You have to be the one who chooses. Choose the vital. Release the trivial. Trust the compounding. And let the quiet things in your life do their slow, patient, life-changing work. Chapter 6. Turn your dreams into targets you can actually hit. Let me tell you why most goals quietly die. It's not because the people who set them lacked desire. It's not because they didn't want it badly enough. It's not because they weren't disciplined or smart or capable. Goals die for a much simpler reason. They were never specific enough for the mind to actually pursue them. And a mind that doesn't know exactly what it's chasing will eventually stop chasing altogether. Think about how you've probably set goals in the past. I want to get healthier this year. I want to make more money. I want to be more productive. I want to grow as a person. These sound beautiful when you say them out loud. They feel like ambition. They feel like intention. But notice something. None of them tell you what to do tomorrow morning. None of them tell you when you've succeeded. None of them give you a way to measure whether you're moving forward or just drifting. And so the mind, faced with this beautiful but blurry wish, does what minds do when they don't know where to begin. They wait. They postpone. They make plans about plans. They research instead of acting. They wait for clarity to arrive, but clarity never arrives on its own. Clarity has to be built. This is where targets become so important. A goal is a direction. A target is a destination. A goal says, I want to head north. A target says, I'm going to that specific lighthouse on that specific coast, and I'll know I've arrived when I can touch its door. Targets are what your mind can actually grab onto and pursue. Without them, even the most ambitious dreams just float in the air, untouched, until you eventually forget you ever set them. I want you to feel the difference. Imagine you woke up tomorrow and your only mission was, be healthier. Where do you start? Do you go for a walk, eat differently, stretch, read about nutrition, sleep more? The choices are infinite, which means action becomes nearly impossible. Now imagine you woke up tomorrow and your target was walk for 30 minutes after lunch, and replace my afternoon snack with a piece of fruit. Suddenly, the entire day has shape. You know what you're doing at 1:30. You know what you're not eating at 3. Decision-making collapses into action because the path is visible. That's the magic of turning a goal into a target. You convert ambition into traction. This isn't about being rigid. It isn't about turning your life into a spreadsheet. It's about giving your mind something real to chase. Because the mind can't chase smoke. It can only chase shapes. So let's walk through the practice of building targets gently and step by step. The first question to ask any vague goal is this: what does success actually look like in concrete terms? Not in feelings, not in adjectives, in numbers, behaviors, finished things, or measurable outcomes. If your goal is get in shape, your target might become do strength training 3 times a week for 6 months and lose 10 kilograms by autumn. If your goal is make more money, your target might become add an extra $2,000 a month within 90 days by acquiring 4 new clients for my freelance work. Notice how specific these become. Notice how you immediately know what to do next when a target is this clear. Specificity isn't a constraint. Specificity is a gift you give your future self. Once you have a target, the next move is something called chunking. Chunking is what you do when a target feels too big to swallow whole. Big targets are intimidating. They look like mountains, and mountains paralyze the mind. But every mountain is just a series of steps, and chunking is the practice of breaking the mountain into steps your brain can actually take. If your target for the year is to add $24,000 to your income, the monthly chunk is $2,000. The weekly chunk is roughly $500. The daily chunk might be something like 1 outreach conversation, 1 proposal sent, or 1 hour spent improving your skill. Suddenly, the giant target has become a daily action, and daily actions are something the mind can actually do. After chunking comes sequencing, which is one of those quiet skills that separates people who finish things from people who keep starting them. Sequencing is the art of doing things in the right order. Many people fail at their targets not because they took the wrong actions, but because they took the right actions in the wrong sequence. They tried to scale before they stabilized. They tried to optimize before they had something working. They tried to add the fancy details before the foundation was solid. If you're trying to build a fitness habit, the sequence matters. Don't start by buying a complicated training program. Start by walking every day. Then add basic strength work. Then refine. If you're trying to start a business, don't start by designing a logo and registering a complicated company. Start by finding out if anyone actually wants what you're offering. Sequence creates calm. Sequence creates progress. Without it, you'll be doing a lot of things, but none of them will be in the right order to actually build momentum. There's something I want to name out loud because it traps so many wonderful, ambitious people, and that's the trap of preparation. Preparation feels productive. Preparation feels responsible. Preparation feels mature. But preparation, when it goes on too long, is just procrastination wearing a respectable outfit. There's a moment in every project where you have enough information, enough tools, enough clarity, and the only thing left is to begin. That moment usually arrives long before we let ourselves act on it. We keep researching, planning, gathering, refining, because preparation feels safer than the vulnerability of starting. But starting is the only thing that turns a target into a result. Preparation never finished anyone's book. Preparation never built anyone's business. Preparation never changed anyone's body. Doing did all of that. So at some point, gently but firmly, you have to close the planning notebook and open the doing notebook. One of the most powerful gifts a clear target gives you is accountability. Vague goals are slippery. You can't really fail at be more productive because you can always claim you're trying. But concrete targets leave no room to negotiate with yourself. If your target is to write 300 words a day, you either did or you didn't. If your target is to call 10 potential clients this week, you either did or you didn't. That kind of clarity feels uncomfortable at first because it removes the soft escape hatches we've been using to avoid measuring ourselves. But discomfort is where growth lives, and measurement isn't your enemy. Measurement is just a mirror. It tells you the truth about where you actually are, so you can decide where you actually want to go. Another piece of this is freeing your targets from your emotions. This might be one of the most important shifts you can make. If your progress depends on whether you feel motivated, inspired, or energetic, you will never sustain anything important, because there will be plenty of days, more days than you'd like to admit, when you don't feel any of those things. Targets remove the emotional negotiation. You don't ask yourself if you feel like doing it. You just do it because it's what's on the schedule, what's on the plan, what's on the path. Motivation becomes irrelevant. The path becomes the priority. And ironically, by removing the dependence on feelings, you build the kind of consistency that eventually generates real feelings of pride, momentum, and confidence. I want to be honest with you about something. Turning goals into targets isn't always emotionally easy. There's something almost romantic about keeping your dreams vague. As long as they stay vague, they can stay perfect in your imagination. The moment you make them specific, you've signed up for the possibility of falling short. You've made a promise to yourself that you might not keep. And that scares us, often more than we realize. So we keep the dreams floating, beautiful and untouched, because untouched dreams can never disappoint us. But here's the truth. Untouched dreams also never come true. The only way a dream becomes real is by stepping out of its perfect cloud and into the imperfect ground of execution. That step is brave. That step is uncomfortable. And that step is the only one that matters. So here's what I want you to try. Pick one goal you've been carrying around for a while. Just one. Look at it gently. Then ask yourself, what would the target version of this look like? Write it down. Make it specific. Make it measurable. Make it real. Then break it into a monthly chunk, a weekly chunk, and a daily action. Don't try to do this with every goal in your life right now. Just one. Watch what happens when a single vague dream becomes a single concrete target. You'll feel the air change. You'll feel the next step become visible. And once you've experienced that with one goal, you can do it with the next and the next, until your entire life is built on targets you can actually hit instead of dreams you keep postponing. Dreams inspire. Targets operationalize. Both have a place. But if you only ever live in the dream and never step into the target, you'll spend your life imagining a version of yourself you never actually became. And that, more than failure, is what most people grieve when they look back on their lives. Not what they tried and didn't accomplish, but what they never tried at all. Targets are how you make sure that won't be your story. Chapter 7. Smooth the path so you stop fighting yourself. There's a quiet truth that almost nobody tells you about progress, and once you understand it, it will change how you approach almost everything in your life. Here it is. Most of what makes things hard isn't the thing itself. It's the friction surrounding it. The actual core task, exercising, writing, working on the business, having the conversation, is usually not as hard as we tell ourselves. What's hard is everything around it. The setup, the preparation, the transitions, the decisions, the interruptions, the emotional residue, the distractions, the clutter. All of these are forms of friction, and friction is what makes consistency feel impossible even when the task itself is simple. Most people, when they struggle with consistency, assume they need more willpower. They blame themselves for being undisciplined. They search for motivation videos, accountability partners, mindset shifts, anything that will help them push harder through the resistance. But here's what I've learned, and what I want to share with you with kindness. You don't need more willpower. You need less friction. The smartest, happiest, most consistent people in any field are not the ones with superhuman discipline. They're the ones who designed their lives so that the right things were easier to do and the wrong things were harder. That's it. That's the entire secret. Imagine two people who both want to read more. The first one keeps the book in a stack in the closet, has a phone next to the bed, leaves the television on as background noise, and tells themselves every night that they should be reading. After a week, they've read 3 pages and they feel like a failure. The second person puts the book on the pillow, charges the phone in another room, leaves a soft lamp on by the bed, and never turns on the television in the bedroom. They read every night without trying. The difference between these two isn't character, it's friction. One person made reading hard, the other made it easy. Both got exactly what their environment was designed for. This is what most productivity advice misses. It treats your willpower as the variable, but your willpower fluctuates wildly. Some days you have plenty. Other days you barely have any. The environment, on the other hand, is stable. The environment works whether you're inspired or exhausted. The environment shapes you even when you're not paying attention. So if you want to build a life of consistency, you have to stop relying on the unreliable thing and start designing the reliable thing. Let's walk through the different kinds of friction, because once you see them, you can start dismantling them one at a time, gently and patiently. The first kind is physical friction. Your environment is the most powerful system you live inside every day, and you barely notice it. A kitchen stocked with ultra-processed snacks creates friction against eating well. You'll have to fight yourself every time you walk in there. A workspace cluttered with papers, half-finished projects, and visual chaos creates friction against focused work. Your brain will keep getting distracted by all the open loops. A bedroom with screens, lights, and noise creates friction against deep sleep. You'll lie there wondering why you can't relax. The fix isn't dramatic. You don't have to redesign your entire home this weekend. Just look at the spaces where you do your important things and ask, What in this environment is fighting me? Then remove one thing, just one. Then notice how much easier the right behavior becomes. The second kind is digital friction. This is the modern poison that almost nobody designs around carefully enough. Every notification on your phone is a small invitation for your attention to leave whatever you were doing. Every open tab on your computer is a small invitation for your mind to wander. Every social platform you scroll through casually is rewriting how your brain handles focus. You don't need to throw your phone in a river. You just need to put thoughtful guardrails around it. Turn off notifications that don't actually serve you. Move social apps off your home screen. Create a dedicated workspace on your computer that doesn't have entertainment tabs constantly open. Designate certain hours of the day as digital free. Small shifts, massive returns, because every minute your attention doesn't get hijacked is a minute that can be invested in something real. The third kind is time friction. This is when your schedule itself is fighting you. If your calendar is filled with random interruptions, unpredictable obligations, and no protected windows for deep work, your priorities will always lose to whoever shouts loudest in the moment. Simplicity asks you to be the designer of your time, not the victim of it. This doesn't mean rigid scheduling. It means intentional scheduling. It means deciding when you're available and when you're not. It means protecting blocks for the work that matters. It means honoring those blocks the way you'd honor a meeting with someone important, because the meeting is with the most important person in your life, which is you and the future you're trying to build. The fourth kind is procedural friction. This is when your process for doing something is just too complicated. If starting your workout requires changing clothes, packing a bag, driving 30 minutes, and dealing with parking, you'll find 1,000 reasons not to go. But if you can do 20 minutes of bodyweight work in your living room, the friction collapses. If writing requires the perfect software, the perfect playlist, the perfect mindset, and a 3-hour block, you'll never write. But if writing means opening a blank document and putting down one paragraph, you can do that almost anywhere, anytime. Look at your important habits and ask, how many steps does it take to begin? Then cut that number in half. Then cut it in half again, because the easier something is to begin, the more often it will happen. The fifth kind, and this is the one most people don't see, is emotional friction. This is the internal resistance that makes a task feel heavier than it actually is. It's the perfectionism that whispers, "You're not ready yet." It's the fear that says, "What if you fail?" It's the shame that murmurs, "Who do you think you are to try this?" Emotional friction often hides as logical reasoning, but it's really just unprocessed feelings dressed up as practicality. The way to dissolve emotional friction is rarely through brute force. It's usually through making the task small enough that your fears can't gather around it. Don't write a book. Write a sentence. Don't run a marathon. Walk to the corner. Don't transform your whole life. Just do one tiny piece of it today. Small actions slip past emotional defenses because they don't feel important enough to defend against. And once you've taken the small action, the next one gets easier. Motion dissolves resistance. The sixth kind is social friction. Some people in your life make your goals easier. Their presence is encouraging. Their values align with yours. Their energy lifts you. Other people often without meaning to, complicate everything. They drain your bandwidth with constant drama, demand your attention with manufactured urgencies, or quietly undermine your direction with their doubts. You don't have to cut these people out of your life, but you do have to create boundaries that protect your energy. Boundaries aren't unkind. Boundaries are how you stay available for the people and pursuits that matter most. And finally, there's identity friction. This is the gap between who you are now and who you're trying to become, and it can be the heaviest friction of all. If you still see yourself as someone who doesn't follow through, every attempt to follow through will feel like swimming against your own current. If you still see yourself as someone who isn't a writer, every word will feel like pretending. Identity quietly shapes everything. The good news is that identity is malleable. It shifts through small acts of evidence. Each time you take a tiny action aligned with who you're becoming, you whisper to yourself, "Maybe this is who I am." Repeat that enough times, and the new identity takes root. Then the old friction dissolves on its own. I want to invite you into a gentle practice this week. Pick one area of your life that has been heavier than it needs to be. Look at it through this lens of friction. Ask yourself, what's making this harder than it has to be? Is it the environment, the schedule, the process, my own emotions, the people around me? Then remove one piece of friction, just one. Don't try to fix everything at once. Just make one thing easier. Then watch what happens. Watch how your consistency starts to return. Watch how the willpower you thought you lacked was actually there all along, just buried under a mountain of unnecessary obstacles. You don't have to push harder. You have to design better. And once you start designing your life around your real self, the one who gets tired, the one who has mood swings, the one who isn't always at their peak, you stop fighting yourself. You start working with yourself, and that partnership between you and the life you're building is one of the most beautiful things you'll ever experience. Chapter 8. A lighter schedule, a heavier impact. I want to challenge something that the modern world has tried to convince you of for a long time. The idea that a packed schedule is a sign of a meaningful life. The idea that a full calendar means you're important. The idea that exhaustion is a badge of honor. The idea that if you're not constantly moving, constantly responding, constantly producing, you must be falling behind. This story has cost more people more peace than almost any other story in our era. And I want to gently invite you to consider that the opposite might actually be true. Look at the people whose work you admire most, not the loud ones, the ones whose output stands the test of time, the writers whose books still get read decades later, the artists whose work still moves people, the thinkers whose ideas still echo, the entrepreneurs who built things that lasted. If you study their lives, you'll find something almost shocking. They didn't live frantically. Most of them protected enormous amounts of unscheduled, unspoken for time. They worked deeply, not constantly. They thought slowly, not reactively. They moved with intention, not with the panicked rhythm of someone who's afraid of missing something. Their schedules weren't full. Their lives were. There's a difference, and I want you to feel that difference. A full schedule and a full life are not the same thing. In fact, they often work against each other. The fuller your schedule gets, the less room there is for the things that actually make a life feel meaningful. Reflection, connection, creation, recovery, curiosity, spontaneity. These things require space, and space is the one thing a packed schedule never has. Here's a principle that took me years to truly understand. Work expands to fill the time you give it. If you give yourself the whole day to write a report, it will take the whole day. If you give yourself 2 focused hours, it will somehow take 2 hours and often be better. Time pressure, when used wisely, isn't cruelty. It's clarity. It forces the mind to drop the non-essential and focus on what matters. Conversely, abundant time can become a trap. With too much time, focus dilutes. Tasks stretch. Procrastination finds its way in through the gaps. Perfectionism takes root because there's room for endless revision. A lighter schedule with focused windows often produces more than a heavy schedule with sprawling availability. The reason most people resist a lighter schedule is emotional, not practical. A busy calendar feels like protection. It feels like proof. Proof that you matter. Proof that you're contributing. Proof that you're a real participant in the world. The thought of a less full calendar can feel almost threatening because it raises an uncomfortable question. If I'm not busy, who am I? That question has frightened many people into staying busier than they needed to be, for longer than they wanted to be, doing things that didn't actually matter to them. I want to invite you to face that question gently. You are not your schedule. You are not your responsiveness. You are not the speed at which you reply to messages. The you that matters lives somewhere quieter than that, and to find that you have to be willing to leave some space in your days. So let's talk about how to lighten the load practically. The first step is identifying your non-negotiables. These are the activities that, when consistently honored, define the trajectory and quality of your life. They might include deep work on your craft, time with the people you love, movement and rest for your body, reading, reflection, creative work. Whatever they are for you, these activities should be the first things on your calendar, not the last. The mistake most people make is filling the calendar with everyone else's priorities first, and then trying to squeeze their own important work into the leftover gaps. There are no leftover gaps. By the time you get to them, you're depleted, and the important work doesn't get the version of you it deserves. Schedule the important things first. Let the rest of the day arrange itself around them. The second step is reducing fragmentation. A fragmented day is one where your attention is broken into 1,000 small pieces. 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, an hour interrupted by 3 phone calls, a coffee break interrupted by a notification, a lunch interrupted by an email. Fragmentation looks productive because you're moving constantly, but it produces almost nothing of depth. The mind needs unbroken time to enter its deeper modes of thinking. 2 protected hours of focus will produce more than 10 fragmented hours of activity. Look at your day and ask, where can I create longer, unbroken windows of attention? Then defend those windows like they're sacred, because for the work that actually matters, they are. The third step is reducing transitions. Every time you switch from one type of task to another, your brain pays a cognitive tax. The tax is small individually, but over a day it adds up to staggering amounts of lost clarity. The way to reduce this is to group similar tasks together. Do all your email in 1 or 2 designated blocks instead of throughout the day. Do all your phone calls in a single block instead of scattered randomly. Do all your administrative work in one session instead of letting it bleed into everything else. Protect your deep work from being interrupted by surface work. The fewer transitions your day has, the more output it produces, even if you're working fewer total hours. The fourth step is the brave one, learning to say no to non-essential commitments. This is where most people's schedules quietly become heavy. They don't say no often enough. They take on small obligations one at a time, and each one feels manageable in the moment. But together, they create a weight that crushes their week. Every yes is a no to something else. Every commitment to someone else is a withdrawal from your own bank of time and energy. Saying no isn't unkind. Saying no protects your capacity to say a meaningful yes to the things that matter most. And here's the truth that took me a long time to accept. The people in your life who actually care about you will not be wounded by your boundaries. They'll respect them. The ones who push back against your boundaries were often the ones treating your time as theirs to spend. Now here's the paradox I want to leave you with. When you lighten your schedule, your output often increases, not because you're working less hard, but because you're working with more intention. Instead of being spread across 20 mediocre commitments, your energy gets focused on a few meaningful ones. Instead of touching everything lightly, you touch a few things deeply. And depth, my friend, is what creates the kind of work that lasts. Anyone can produce a lot of mediocre output. Few people can produce a small amount of remarkable output. The difference is almost always how protected their schedule was. A lighter schedule also gives you something that the modern world has almost lost respect for: recovery. Your mind, your body, your creativity, your relationships, they all need recovery. Without it, every domain of your life starts to dull. You become a manager of obligations instead of a creator of your life. You start surviving your days instead of designing them. Recovery isn't laziness. Recovery is the soil where future work grows. Cut it out, and the harvest dries up. So here's the gentle invitation. Look at your calendar for the next week. Look at it honestly. How much of what's on it would actually matter if you removed it? How many commitments did you say yes to out of guilt, fear, habit, or social pressure? How much space is there for the work that actually makes your life feel meaningful? Then make one small change. Remove one non-essential thing. Protect one window for your real work. Decline one meeting that could have been an email. Start somewhere small and watch the breathing room return. Because that breathing room isn't just rest. That breathing room is where your best self lives. Chapter 9. A simple money strategy that actually grows with you. I want to talk to you about money, but not in the way most people talk about money. Not with charts, not with predictions, not with promises of secret strategies that will make you wealthy overnight if you just buy the right course or follow the right guru. I want to talk to you about money the way a trusted friend would talk to you over a long, quiet conversation. Honestly, gently, without the noise. Because here's what I've noticed about the world of personal finance. It's been complicated on purpose. Most of the noise that surrounds money exists because complexity sells better than clarity. A simple message like, spend less than you earn and invest the difference consistently, doesn't get clicks. A flashy message about the next hot investment the secret tax loophole, the seven-figure strategy, that gets attention. So the airwaves fill with noise, and meanwhile, the people who actually build wealth are sitting quietly in their living rooms, doing the boring, simple things that have worked for centuries. The truth about money is almost embarrassingly simple. The hard part is staying simple in a world that keeps trying to complicate you out of your own peace. Let me share something that took me far longer than it should have to learn. The first lesson of building wealth is not how to make more money. It's how to stop the leaks. If money flows out of your life faster than it flows in, no amount of additional income will fix the problem. You'll just have a bigger leak and a bigger sense of frustration. A lot of people skip this step because it's not exciting. They want to talk about investing strategies and side hustles before they've ever taken an honest look at where their money is actually going. But the foundation of every solid financial life is built on this one quiet act: knowing where your money goes and choosing where you want it to go instead. This isn't about extreme frugality. It isn't about counting every coffee or feeling guilty for every meal out. It's about intentionality. There's a difference between spending $100 on something that genuinely improves your life and spending $100 on something you barely remembered buying a week later. Both transactions look identical on a bank statement. They are not identical in your life. One of them is investment. The other is leakage. The simple act of paying attention to that difference gently and without judgment will change your financial trajectory more than any complicated strategy ever could. Once the leaks are addressed, the next step is stabilizing what comes in. Money is far easier to manage when it arrives in predictable patterns: a steady paycheck, a consistent freelance retainer, recurring revenue from a small business. When income is unpredictable, every aspect of financial planning becomes complicated. You can't budget effectively. You can't invest consistently. You can't plan ahead. So if your income is currently unstable, the first goal isn't necessarily to make more. It's to make it more predictable. Stability is a quiet superpower in finance. It's not glamorous, but it's the soil that everything else grows in. Now let's talk about the heart of wealth building, and I want you to feel this one in your bones. Wealth is built through compounding, and compounding is the most patient force in the financial universe. It doesn't care about hot tips. It doesn't care about market timing. It doesn't care about the news cycle. It rewards one thing and one thing only: consistent participation over long periods of time. You don't need to find the next great investment. You don't need to guess which stocks will explode. You don't need exotic strategies. You need to put money into appreciating assets regularly and then leave it alone long enough for time to do its slow, miraculous work. There are essentially three simple engines that build lasting wealth for most people. The first is owning assets that appreciate over time. The second is owning assets that generate income. The third is avoiding liabilities that drag your finances backward. That's the whole framework. Almost everything else is detail dressed up to look like wisdom. The people who quietly build wealth often have surprisingly boring portfolios. They've owned the same investments for 20 years. They didn't sell when the news got scary. They didn't chase the trend that everyone was talking about at the dinner party. They stayed boring, and boring made them wealthy. The people who struggle financially, on the other hand, often have hyperactive financial lives. They jump from strategy to strategy. They panic sell when markets fall and buy back when markets recover, locking in losses every cycle. They follow whatever investment influencer made the most confident video that week. They emotionally react to every headline. This isn't a character flaw. The financial world is designed to provoke this kind of reactivity. But the cost of all that activity is staggering. Emotional investing is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. Simplicity in investing means setting a long-term strategy that matches your goals and timeline, and then having the courage to do nothing when the world is screaming at you to act. There's another piece of the financial picture that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's lifestyle creep. As people earn more, they tend to spend more. The car gets bigger, the apartment gets nicer, the vacations get fancier, the wardrobe gets more expensive. Each upgrade feels small in the moment, but together they create a financial treadmill where you have to keep running just to stay in place. The cruelest part is that lifestyle creep often happens before wealth has actually been built. So you end up looking wealthy while remaining financially fragile. Real wealth and the appearance of wealth are very different things. The first creates freedom, the second creates pressure. Simple living, in financial terms, isn't about depriving yourself. It's about choosing flexibility over performance. The person who lives below their means has options. They can take a risk. They can leave a job they hate. They can invest in an opportunity. They can survive a downturn without panic. The person who stretched their lifestyle to match their income has none of those options. They're locked into their current situation because their financial bones aren't strong enough to support change. Simplicity, in this context, isn't about being cheap. It's about being free. Let me share something else that gets buried in financial advice. Earning more money is often easier than saving more money. There's a ceiling to how much you can cut from your spending. There's no ceiling to how much you can earn. So while controlling your outflow is essential, never forget that your earning capacity is one of the most powerful financial tools you have. And here's the simple truth about earning more. It almost always comes down to building skills that are valuable to other people. The world rewards skill. It rewards expertise. It rewards the ability to solve problems that other people need solved. You don't need to invent something revolutionary. You just need to get genuinely good at something useful and let your value compound over time, the same way investments do. I want to gently warn you about one more trap that complicates many people's financial lives, and that's the trap of comparison. Money becomes dramatic and confusing the moment you start measuring your finances against other people's. Social platforms have made this trap larger and more dangerous than ever. You see what people are buying, where they're traveling, what they're driving, and you start to feel like you're falling behind. But here's something you should know. Most of what looks like wealth on social media is actually debt and performance. Real wealth is quiet. Real wealth lives in retirement accounts you can't see. Real wealth lives in paid-off homes. Real wealth lives in the calm of someone who doesn't need to perform for anyone. When you stop comparing, you stop performing. When you stop performing, you stop making financial decisions for the wrong reasons. And the moment you stop making decisions for the wrong reasons, your financial life simplifies dramatically. Let's tie this all together with one last principle. A good financial strategy must be able to scale with you. It must be able to handle good times and hard times, abundance and constraint, the year you got the promotion and the year you got laid off. Complicated strategies often collapse under stress. They require constant attention, constant adjustment, constant monitoring. Simple strategies survive almost anything. Automate your saving, automate your investing, keep your lifestyle intentional, build skills that increase your earning power, avoid debt that doesn't pay you back, let time do its quiet work. None of this is revolutionary. None of it will make you famous in financial circles, but all of it will, with patience, build the kind of financial life that lets you sleep well at night and live freely during the day. You don't need a financial life that impresses people. You need a financial life that supports the life you actually want, and that life is built almost without exception on a foundation of beautiful, boring simplicity. Chapter 10. Speak honestly and stop manufacturing drama. Let me share something that took me an embarrassing number of years to understand. Most of the conflict in our lives isn't actually caused by what other people do. It's caused by how we communicate or fail to communicate about what they do. The fight isn't usually about the thing. It's about everything that surrounded the thing, the assumptions we made, the words we didn't say, the meaning we invented, the stories we built in our own heads before we ever opened our mouths. Communication is the silent architecture of every relationship in your life, and when that architecture is shaky, even the strongest love and the deepest friendship can start to crack. I want to walk you through this gently because communication is tender territory. It's where we're most vulnerable and most defensive, often at the same time. But if there's one area where simplicity will transform your life almost immediately, this is it. Clear communication doesn't just reduce conflict, it deepens connection, it builds trust, it saves enormous amounts of mental energy that would otherwise be spent on resentment, replaying conversations, and wondering what someone really meant. The drama you've been exhausted by isn't always created by other people. Sometimes it's created by the fog between you and them, a fog that clear words could lift in minutes. The first principle of simple communication is saying what you actually mean. This sounds obvious, and yet almost no one practices it consistently. Instead, most of us hint, we imply, we test. We hope the other person will somehow figure out what we want without us having to risk the vulnerability of asking directly. We bury our needs under layers of politeness, sarcasm, indirection, or strategic silence, and then we get hurt when those needs aren't met. The truth is, most people are not mind readers, and expecting them to be is one of the kindest sounding cruelties we inflict on the people we love. We hold them responsible for understanding signals we never sent clearly. Directness is not aggression. I want to make this distinction very clear because a lot of people avoid directness because they confuse it with rudeness. Aggression is when you say something with the intent to wound. Directness is when you say something with the intent to be understood. The first cares about hurting. The second cares about clarity. You can be deeply kind and deeply direct at the same time. In fact, the kindest thing you can do for the people in your life is to let them know what you actually need, want, feel, and think instead of leaving them to guess. Guessing breeds resentment in both directions. The person who didn't get their need met feels unseen. The person who couldn't read the signals feels accused of failing at something they didn't know they were being tested on. Everyone loses. Directness, gently delivered, prevents all of this. The second principle is making your expectations visible. So many of our conflicts come not from violated agreements, but from violated assumptions. We expected something the other person didn't know we expected. We assumed something they didn't know we assumed. Then when they don't meet the unspoken standard, we feel let down, even though the standard was never communicated to them in the first place. This happens in friendships, in marriages, in workplaces, in families. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple, but it requires courage. Speak your expectations out loud. This is what I need from this relationship. This is what makes me feel valued. This is how I handle conflict. This is what I won't tolerate. This is how I work best. When expectations are spoken, behavior can align. When expectations are silent, behavior is just a guess, and guesses are wrong far more often than they're right. The third principle is asking instead of assuming. This one will save you more emotional suffering than almost anything else I can teach you. The mind is a story-making machine. When information is missing, the mind fills in the gaps with narrative. Someone didn't reply to your message for 6 hours. The mind builds a story. They're upset with me. They don't care about our friendship. They're avoiding the question. A colleague was short with you in a meeting? The mind builds a story. They have a problem with me. They're undermining my work. Something is going on behind my back. A partner forgot something important? The mind builds a story. They don't love me as much as they used to. They've stopped caring. I'm not a priority. Most of these stories are not true. Most of the time the other person was busy, distracted, tired, or dealing with something in their own life that had nothing to do with you. But your mind, without the truth to go on, will choose the most painful interpretation almost every time. The cure is simple. Just ask. Hey, did you see my message? Is everything okay between us? I noticed you seemed off in the meeting. Is something going on? I felt a little forgotten yesterday. Can we talk about it? Asking takes courage, but asking dissolves more invented suffering than almost any other practice in human relationships. The fourth principle is real listening. Most of us, if we're being honest, don't actually listen during conversations. We wait. We rehearse. We prepare our response. We think about what we're going to say the moment the other person finally stops talking. This isn't listening. This is verbal combat with breaks for inhaling. Real listening is rare and powerful. It's being present enough to actually receive what the other person is saying, including the emotion underneath their words. It's not interrupting to defend yourself. It's not jumping in with your counterexample. It's not solving their problem before they finish describing it. It's simply being there, fully, with what they're trying to express. People can feel the difference. They can feel when they're being heard versus when they're being processed. And when they feel heard, conflict naturally softens because their nervous system gets the message that they're not under attack. The fifth principle is the willingness to be honest before honesty becomes urgent. Most relational explosions come from small honesty avoided over and over again until it builds into a giant explosion of resentment. The small frustration you didn't mention, the boundary that got crossed and you let it slide, the feeling that got hurt and you minimized to keep the peace. Each of these small avoidances is a deposit into a hidden bank account of resentment, and one day that account demands to be paid, usually with interest. The simpler path, though it doesn't always feel easier in the moment, is to address small things while they're still small. Hey, can we talk about something that's been on my mind? Those words, said early, prevent enormous explosions later. Now let me talk about boundaries, because boundaries are some of the most misunderstood tools in relationships. People often think boundaries are walls, ways of pushing others away. They're not. Boundaries are clarity. They tell people exactly where you stand, what you'll accept, what you won't, and how you want to be treated. Without boundaries, you'll constantly feel invaded, and the people in your life won't even know they're invading. They're just operating in the absence of information. When you say, "I love spending time with you, but I need my Sunday mornings to be quiet," you're not pushing them away. You're giving them the information they need to love you well. Boundaries are not selfish. They're how sustainable relationships are built. One of the deepest sources of drama in human interaction is the unconscious desire to win arguments instead of resolve them. When two people are stuck in a conflict, watch carefully. Often, both of them are fighting to be right, fighting to be vindicated, fighting to make the other person see their perspective. But nobody's actually trying to solve anything. Winning an argument is a hollow victory. You might feel right for a few minutes, but the relationship is worse off. Solving a conflict, on the other hand, builds the relationship. It requires you to step out of the trap of ego and into the bigger question. What do we actually want to be true between us at the end of this conversation? When the goal shifts from winning to alignment, drama collapses because there's nothing left to fight about. And finally, the most freeing communication skill of all, not taking things personally. The vast majority of behaviors that bother you have very little to do with you. People are tired, they're stressed, they're navigating their own private storms. They're distracted by problems you'll never know about. When someone is short with you, it's almost never about you. When someone forgets something, it's almost never about you. When someone seems distant, it's almost never about you. Once you internalize this, you stop reading attacks into ordinary human moments. You stop demanding apologies that weren't owed. You stop carrying weight that was never yours. Life becomes lighter, conversations become easier, and the people around you start to feel safer around you because you're no longer interpreting everything as a hidden message about your worth. When you communicate simply, honestly, and clearly, you protect something precious: your peace, your relationships, your mental energy. Drama is one of the most exhausting things a human being can carry, and most of it is preventable through better communication. So this week, try one small thing. Say one thing directly that you would normally hint at. Ask one question instead of assuming. Listen to one person fully without rehearsing your response. Notice what happens. Notice how much lighter your interactions become when there's no longer a fog between you and the people you care about. Communication isn't a skill reserved for diplomats and therapists. It's a skill for anyone who wants a peaceful life. and it can be learned, it can be practiced, it can be mastered. And the day you do, you'll find that the world around you starts to feel kinder, not because the world changed, but because you stopped translating it through the lens of unspoken assumptions. Chapter 11. Trade effort for results. I want to walk you into a hard truth, but I want to do it gently because this one stings, and most people never let themselves feel it. Effort and results are not the same thing. They live in different worlds. You can pour yourself into work for years and still have very little to show for it. Not because you weren't trying, not because you didn't care, but because effort without direction and without leverage is just motion. And motion, no matter how heroic it looks, doesn't necessarily produce outcomes that matter. This is one of the loneliest realizations a hard-working person can come to. You've been busy, you've been tired, you've been showing up every day, you've been doing everything you thought you were supposed to do, and then one day you look around and notice that the life you imagined hasn't actually arrived. The promotion never came. The business never grew the way you hoped. The book never got written. The relationship never deepened. You're exhausted, but not enriched. And the question whispers in the back of your mind. What was all that effort for? I want to be honest with you. The world doesn't reward effort. The world rewards outcomes. This sounds harsh, but it's actually liberating once you stop fighting it. Because the moment you accept it, you stop measuring your life by how hard you've worked and start measuring it by what you've actually built. And that single shift can change the entire trajectory of your years. Let's break down what's really happening when effort doesn't produce results. Most people work hard at things that don't compound. They spend their best energy on tasks that need to be done again tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that, with no permanent gain accumulating. They mistake activity for progress. They mistake exhaustion for productivity. They confuse the feeling of being busy with the reality of moving forward. And after years of this, they're worn out, with very little to show for it, except a vague sense that they must be doing something wrong. The good news is, you're not doing anything wrong. You've just been operating under an outdated belief that effort itself is the goal. Simplicity asks you to update that belief. Effort is a tool, not a destination. The question isn't, how hard did I work today? The question is, what did my work produce today? Those are different questions, and they lead to very different lives. Let me introduce you to a concept that will reshape how you allocate your time, and it's the concept of leverage. Leverage is the multiplier that makes a unit of effort produce more than its cost. Some actions are one-to-one. You put in an hour, you get an hour's worth of output. Other actions are one-to-many. You put in an hour, and that hour keeps producing for weeks, months, or years afterward. The difference between these two kinds of actions is enormous, and most people never consciously notice which kind they're spending their day on. A few quick examples will make this clear. Writing one email to one person is one-to-one. Writing one article that 10,000 people will read over the next year is one-to-many. Manually doing a repetitive task forever is one-to-one. Building a system that does that task automatically is one-to-many. Selling your time for a single project is one-to-one. Building a product that can be sold to many people without your continuous presence is one to many. Notice how the second category in each pair requires more thought up front, but pays back many times over. That's leverage. That's where results live. Now, I want to talk about something that disguises itself as productivity, but is actually one of the biggest enemies of results. Perfectionism. Perfectionism wears the clothes of high standards, but underneath, it's just fear in a fancy outfit. It's the fear of being judged, the fear of being inadequate, the fear of being seen before you're ready. Perfectionism convinces you that you're being thorough when you're actually being paralyzed. It tells you that one more revision, one more research session, one more refinement will finally make the work good enough. But it's never quite good enough because perfectionism isn't a standard. It's a moving goalpost designed to keep you from ever finishing. And unfinished work, no matter how beautiful in your head, produces no results in the world. Simplicity invites you into a different relationship with your work. It says, done is better than perfect. Imperfect output is more valuable than perfect potential. Shipping the work is the work. The market doesn't reward the most polished idea sitting on your hard drive. The market rewards the imperfect idea that actually exists in the world, that people can use, respond to, and build on. Every successful creator, builder, entrepreneur, and artist has had to make peace with this. Their early work was rough. Their first version was clumsy. But they shipped it. They put it out. They got feedback. They refined. And over time, their work became remarkable, not because they waited until it was perfect to start, but because they started before they felt ready and improved as they went. Another major leak of effort is what I'd call redundant work. This is when you keep doing the same things over and over without ever building systems that would let you stop doing them. A business owner who personally handles every customer email instead of creating templates and FAQs. A creator who manually publishes every piece of content instead of building a workflow. A professional who keeps every important detail in their head instead of writing it down once and being able to reference it forever. Redundant work feels productive because you're always doing something, but you're trapped in a loop. Real progress comes from doing something once well enough that it keeps paying you back, or from building a system that handles the repetition so your mind can move to higher leverage work. Scattered focus is another silent killer of results. When you're trying to make progress on 6 things at once, you're really making progress on none of them. Each shift in attention costs you. Each new priority dilutes the energy you have for the others. The brain wasn't built to compound across many directions simultaneously. It was built to dig deep in one place. Simplicity asks you to pick a small number of things that genuinely matter and to give them your concentrated attention until they bear fruit, instead of spreading your effort thin across a dozen ideas and wondering why nothing is ripening. Results also depend on something most people avoid, which is feedback. Feedback is information about whether your effort is working, and feedback is often uncomfortable because it tells the truth. If you're running a business, the feedback is whether customers are buying. If you're building a skill, the feedback is whether you're improving. If you're working on your health, the feedback is whether your body is responding. Many people unconsciously avoid feedback because they don't want to find out that their effort hasn't been working. But feedback isn't a punishment. Feedback is the gift that lets you correct course. Without it, you can pour effort into something for years that was never going to work, when a moment of honest feedback could have redirected you in the first month. There's one more piece of the results puzzle I want to share, and it has to do with timing. Not just what you do, but when you do it. Your energy isn't uniform across the day. There are hours when your brain is sharp and creative, and hours when your brain is dull and reactive. Most people accidentally do their most important work during their dullest hours, after they've spent their peak hours on email, meetings, and administrative tasks. By the time they sit down to do the work that actually matters, they have nothing left to give. Simplicity asks you to match your most important work to your sharpest hours. Protect them. Use them for the work that compounds. Save the low-energy hours for the tasks that don't require your best self. This single shift can dramatically increase your output without adding a single hour to your week. And here's the final gentle truth I want to leave you with. Results don't come from heroic bursts. They come from consistent execution over meaningful stretches of time. The people who build remarkable lives aren't working dramatically harder than you in any given week. They're just doing the right kind of work, in the right direction, with enough patience to let it compound. They picked work that scales. They protected their attention. They removed redundancy. They got feedback and adjusted. They didn't quit when the early results were small. And one day, almost without warning, the compounding caught up to them, and what looked like overnight success was actually years of quiet, focused, results-oriented work. You can do the same thing. You don't need to work harder. You need to work smarter, in the right direction, on the things that actually produce outcomes. Stop measuring your days by exhaustion. Start measuring them by what got finished. Stop equating effort with achievement. Start asking, what did I move forward today? That single question, asked honestly every evening, will gradually reshape your life from someone who tried hard into someone who actually arrived. Chapter 12. Protect your attention like the treasure. It is wherever your attention goes consistently, your life follows, not where your intentions go, not where your wishes go, where your attention actually lives hour after hour. That's where your real life is being built. And in a world engineered to steal your focus from every direction, learning to protect your attention might be the single most important skill you ever develop. Attention is not infinite. This is the lie the modern world wants you to believe, that you can keep giving fragments of yourself to notifications, feeds, interruptions, and other people's emergencies, and still have enough left for the things that actually matter to you. But you can't. Attention is finite. Once you spend it, it's gone. And by the end of most days, the average person has handed out so many small pieces of focus that there's almost nothing meaningful left for their own life. That's not a personal failure. That's the predictable outcome of living inside a system designed to extract your attention for someone else's profit. Your attention is either being invested or being consumed. Invested attention goes into things that pay you back over time. Learning a skill, building a relationship, creating something, caring for your body, sitting quietly with your own thoughts. Consumed attention goes into things that swallow your time and leave nothing behind. Endless scrolling, reactive responses, watching content you won't remember by tomorrow. Both feel like activity. Only one builds a life. If you honestly track the ratio of invested versus consumed attention in your average day, the result might be uncomfortable, but it would also be informative because awareness is where every meaningful change begins. Protecting attention starts with controlling your inputs. Most people receive whatever the world throws at them and call that normal. Notifications turned on for every app, news alerts buzzing constantly, group chats firing all day, email open in the background, social platforms refreshed compulsively. This isn't living. This is being downloaded into hour after hour by sources that have no responsibility for what their content does to your inner life. Simplicity asks you to choose your inputs the way you choose what you eat. Not everything available deserves to enter you. Most of it is noise. Then comes refusing constant availability. Somewhere along the way, we decided that being reachable at all times was a form of responsibility. But constant availability is actually a form of self-abandonment. It means everyone else's urgencies override your priorities. The people who build great work share one quiet habit. They have hours, sometimes whole days, when they're simply not available. Not because they don't care, but because they understand that depth requires uninterrupted time, and uninterrupted time only exists for those brave enough to be temporarily unreachable. Micro distractions matter more than dramatic ones. A single major interruption is easier to recover from than a dozen tiny ones. Each quick glance at your phone, each brief mental detour, costs you. Deep work requires you to enter a flow state, and flow states die from even brief interruptions. Protect the flow. The output of focused hours dwarfs the output of fragmented ones every single time. And finally, decide what your attention is worthy of. Not every argument deserves your engagement. Not every opinion needs your reaction. Silence is selectivity. The maturity to walk away from noise is one of the quiet superpowers of a focused life. When you guard your attention well, your life starts to organize itself around what actually matters. The fog lifts, your craft deepens, your relationships strengthen, your peace returns. That's what attention does when you stop giving it away carelessly. It comes home and starts building the life you've been imagining. Chapter 13. Stop trading hours for outcomes. Build what scales. There's a question that quietly separates people who eventually break free from people who stay stuck for decades. Are you doing work that only exists when you're personally exerting effort? Or are you building things that keep producing even when you're not there? Both kinds of work have value, but they have very different ceilings. And most people spend their entire lives doing only the first kind without realizing the second kind is what creates real freedom. Non-scalable work requires your direct, ongoing presence to produce output, answering every message yourself, personally delivering every service, trading hours for money linearly. There's nothing wrong with this kind of work. Most of us start there. But if it's the only thing you do, your life will always have a hard ceiling because there are only so many hours in a day. Scalable work is anything that keeps producing results after the initial effort is finished. A book written once and read for decades. A system built once that runs without you. A skill developed once that makes you valuable in countless situations. An asset that pays you whether you're working or sleeping. Scalable work has front-loaded costs. You have to think more and build more in the beginning, but the payoff is exponential because the effort keeps working long after you've moved on. Here's the trap. Non-scalable work feels productive in the moment. You finish a task. You handle a request. You get the small dopamine hit of completion. Meanwhile, the scalable project that could transform your life sits half-built because it doesn't reward you with that same instant feedback. Your brain pulls you back toward what feels immediately useful, and your future self pays the price for years. Simplicity asks you to gradually shift the ratio. If 90% of your effort is non-scalable, start by moving just 5% toward something scalable. Maybe that's documenting a process so someone else can eventually do it. Maybe it's creating a resource that answers the same questions you keep being asked. Maybe it's learning a skill that multiplies your value. Maybe it's building a small system for a task you've done manually for years. The shift doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to begin. Skills are one of the most powerful forms of scalability available to anyone. Writing skills, speaking skills, building skills, designing skills, leading skills, teaching skills. When you develop a high-leverage skill deeply, one unit of effort can reach hundreds, thousands, or millions of people. The world is full of people who are mediocre at 10 things. The world rewards people who are remarkable at one scalable thing. Pick yours. Go deep. Let the leverage do the rest. Freedom, in the end, is what scalability gives you. Not the freedom to do nothing, but the freedom to do what actually matters, because your survival is no longer tied to your hourly output. That's the prize, and it's available to anyone willing to think long-term about how their effort is structured. Chapter 14. Use simplicity to stay consistent for years, not just weeks. Almost anyone can be intense for a month. The graveyard of abandoned goals is full of people who started strong. What's rare and what actually changes lives is consistency that lasts for years. Years are where transformation happens. Years are where habits become identity, where small actions compound into outcomes that look like miracles from the outside. And the secret to lasting consistency isn't greater willpower, it's deeper simplicity. Consistency is not a function of how much discipline you have. Consistency is a function of how much friction your habits have. The lower the friction, the longer the habit survives. Most people who fail at consistency aren't lacking character. They're just trying to maintain habits that are too complicated to sustain. Their workout requires a perfect environment. Their writing requires a perfect mood. When life is messy, which is most of the time, the whole structure collapses. A simple habit can survive a messy day. The person who does 10 push-ups every morning, no matter what, will outperform the person with the perfect gym routine that requires a perfect day. The person who writes 1 paragraph daily will outproduce the person who waits for 3 uninterrupted hours of inspiration. Consistency lives in the simplest version of the habit, the version that can be done even on the hardest days. Lower the activation cost. If beginning is hard, you'll skip it most days. If beginning is easy, you'll do it most days. Make the habit shorter, simpler, faster, until starting requires less effort than skipping. The size can grow later. What matters most is that the habit happens at all. Honor the principle of minimum viable action. When you can't do the full version, do the smallest version. 5 push-ups, 1 page, 5 minutes. The point isn't massive daily progress. The point is to keep the loop intact. Once the loop is intact, scaling up is easy later. Once the loop breaks, restarting is emotionally heavy and often takes weeks. Protect the loop. Even the tiniest version counts. Environment supports consistency more than discipline ever will. If healthy food is at eye level and unhealthy food is hidden, you'll eat better without trying. If your phone is in another room during deep work, you'll focus better. These aren't tricks. They're acknowledgments of how human beings actually work. Shape the environment, and you shape yourself. And then there's identity, the deepest consistency tool of all. Habits that align with your sense of self survive. Habits that contradict your identity collapse. If you see yourself as someone who tries to be healthy, healthy behaviors will always feel optional. If you see yourself as a healthy person, healthy behaviors become expressions of who you are. The way to build this identity is through small acts of evidence. Each time you do the habit, you're casting a vote on who you are. Cast enough votes, and the identity becomes real. Then, consistency stops being a battle. It becomes who you are. Forget intensity. Intensity is for short stories. Duration is for great lives. The future belongs not to the person who can sprint the fastest today, but to the person who can keep walking simply and patiently for years without stopping. Simplicity makes that walk possible. Chapter 15. Carry less. Fewer opinions, fewer obligations, more freedom. Simplicity isn't only about what you do, it's also about what you stop carrying. And honestly, some of the heaviest things in your life right now are invisible. They're not in your closet or on your calendar. They're inside you, in the form of opinions you've absorbed, obligations you never really chose, identities you've outgrown, and emotional weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. Start with opinions. The modern world has convinced us that we need a passionate position on everything. Every news story, every controversy, every public figure's mistake. The pressure to constantly form, defend, and broadcast opinions is exhausting in a way most people don't recognize until they finally step away from it. Owning fewer opinions isn't ignorance, it's clarity. You don't have to have a take on everything. Some things you can simply allow to exist without consuming your mental space. That isn't apathy. That's wisdom. Then there are obligations. How many of the things you do, the events you attend, the responsibilities you carry, were ever truly chosen by you? Or did they just accumulate? Most of us are weighed down by obligations we never consciously agreed to. We just kept going along out of habit, guilt, or fear of disappointing someone. Simplicity gives you permission to renegotiate. You're allowed to release commitments that no longer fit who you are. Doing so isn't selfish, it's honest. Identity is another invisible weight. People carry identities like luggage they forgot to set down. The identity of who they were 10 years ago. The identity their parents projected onto them. The identity attached to a past failure that no longer represents them. These identities harden over time and become invisible cages. If you still see yourself as someone who isn't creative, who isn't disciplined, who isn't good with money, those identities will quietly veto every attempt you make to change. Owning fewer rigid identities gives you the freedom to evolve. Then there's emotional ownership. Many people unconsciously carry the emotions of those around them, the mood of a difficult coworker, the disappointment of a parent, the unspoken expectations of people who don't even know what they want from you. You can care about people without taking on their emotions as your own. You can love people without making yourself responsible for their happiness. Drawing a clean line between what's yours and what's not is one of the most liberating things you can do. Validation is another quiet burden. So many decisions get made not based on what we actually want, but on what we think will be approved of. The career chosen because it impresses. The purchases made to be seen. When you stop performing for an invisible audience, life simplifies. You make choices that align with your actual values. The result is a life that may look quieter from the outside, but feels infinitely fuller from the inside. Even certainty itself can become a burden. The need to know exactly how everything will turn out creates enormous mental tension. Simplicity invites you to trade certainty about outcomes for clarity about your next step. You don't need to know how everything ends. You just need to know what to do now. Freedom isn't being able to do whatever you want. Freedom is being able to move through your life without unnecessary weight. Every opinion you release, every obligation you renegotiate, every identity you outgrow gives you back a little more of yourself. Simplicity, at its deepest level, isn't about removing things. It's about returning to yourself. Conclusion. Here's the truth I most want you to take with you. Simplicity isn't a productivity hack or a trend. It's a way of seeing the world, and through it, a way of seeing yourself with more honesty and more kindness. The paradox of our time is that complexity has become the default, while simplicity has become the differentiator. We live surrounded by options, opinions, opportunities, tools, and distractions. And yet, so many people feel stuck. They're not stuck because they lack ambition. They're stuck because their ambition is buried under layers of complexity they never questioned. Simplicity frees you from that trap. It frees you from the illusion that more effort automatically means more progress. It frees you from the false belief that intelligence must look complicated. It frees you from the lie that a meaningful life must feel heavy. When you simplify your goals, your decisions, your communication, your money, your identity, and your routines, progress starts to feel natural instead of forced. The friction that made consistency so hard begins to dissolve. The cognitive noise that kept clarity rare begins to clear. The invisible drains that were stealing your attention, energy, and momentum begin to close. Throughout this book, we walk together through how simplicity operates in different dimensions of life, how it helps you see clearly, how it helps you decide with intention, how it helps you focus on what matters, how it removes friction, how it compounds results, how it protects attention, how it scales effort, how it strengthens communication, how it builds consistency that lasts. None of these principles require extreme discipline, perfect conditions, or extraordinary talent. They require awareness, subtraction, and the courage to choose less in a world constantly pressuring you to choose more. Complexity impresses the crowd. Simplicity impresses time. Time rewards the person who stays consistent for years, not the person who burns out after a month. Time rewards systems, not heroic effort. Time rewards leverage, not busy work. When you simplify your approach, you align yourself with how progress actually works. Slow at first, then suddenly fast. Almost every major breakthrough looks like magic from the outside, but if you study it closely, you see the compounding effect of simple habits, simple priorities, and simple systems done repeatedly without interruption. Simplicity is not easy. In many cases, it's harder than complexity at the beginning. It's easier to complicate than to clarify. It's easier to say yes than to say no. It's easier to add than to subtract. But simplicity rewards you on the back end. Complexity rewards you on the front end and punishes you later. That's the paradox. The world keeps offering you complicated solutions that feel sophisticated, while the real magic is found in simple processes that feel almost too obvious to matter. But they do matter. They matter because simple things are sustainable, and sustainable things are transformational. When life becomes simpler, you create room to think, room to grow, room to build, room to improve, room to live. Without that room, even the strongest ambitions suffocate. With it, even modest ambitions can grow into extraordinary realities. The people who consistently win in any field do not look frantic. They look calm. They look deliberate. They look unburdened. Simple, but not small. Simple, but effective. Simple, but scalable. So as you move forward, let these questions guide you. What truly matters here? What is the next clear step? What can I remove? What can I say no to? What deserves my attention? What does not? What is essential? What is noise? If you live by those questions, your life won't just become easier. It will become sharper, cleaner, and more aligned with your purpose. The world will continue to grow more complex. That's inevitable. But your life does not have to follow that trajectory. In fact, the advantage belongs to those who move in the opposite direction, those who resist complexity and master simplicity. In the long run, simplicity isn't just the smarter strategy. It's the winning one. Let it become your quiet power in a noisy world.